Beyond politics and above organized religion, a moral authority exists known globally as the ageless wisdom. It is the study of consciousness, the mystery of awareness, which cannot be measured yet will not be denied. This podcast from Michael Benner's Ageless Wisdom Salon features lessons in metaphysics, mysticism, and esoteric philosophy. Those who attend live on Zoom may also participate in group meditation and roundtable discussions. Register for our newsletter at michaelbenner.com. Welcome to the Ageless Wisdom Mystery School with
Michael Benner.
Michael Benner is the author of Fearless Intelligence. The subtitle is The Extraordinary Wisdom of Awareness. He's the creator of a breakthrough self-awareness training called Internal Vigilance, commissioned by the Orange County, California Sheriff's Academy in Anaheim. Michael's also well known throughout Southern California for his popular Human Potential talk radio programs on a number of well-known radio stations. Hi, Michael. Welcome to the Tony Durso Show.
Hello, Tony. It's so nice to see you again.
It's such a pleasure to have you, and I am so looking forward to talking about releasing anxiety. Could you tell us, Michael, how did it all start for you? What's your backstory?
Well, I grew up in southwestern Michigan, a small town of about 6,000 people surrounded by fruit orchards. And it wasn't until I went to university at Michigan State that I really began to expand my horizons and really get a sense of who I am, who I was, and my potential. It was the late 1960s, believe it or not. So it was a time of awakening for many people. And I discovered campus radio through my interest in folk music. I got my politics from Bob Dylan. And I was a real folky. I played guitar. I was in a folk group, and I thought, well, it would be really cool if I did a folk music program on campus radio. Tony, I liked it so much, I changed my major from business to television and radio management. And by my junior year, I was doing news at a commercial radio station in Lansing, Michigan. And I did, in addition to being a full-time college student, City Hall and State Capitol beat. And my minor was journalism, of course. And after graduation, I worked in Detroit for a few years, came to California in the mid-'70s, been here ever since, absolutely love California. And I worked at radio stations all across Los Angeles, big stations, KABC, KLOS, KLSX, KWest, and KCBS, a number of big radio stations over the years, doing a little bit of disc jockey at first, but mostly news, and that's where I began to do radio talk shows as well.
I got you. Now, somewhere along the line, you went from the news, playing music, and so forth. You kind of switched or segued into human potential, and you started doing that as a talk radio program. How did that transition happen?
Well, believe it or not, consciousness, awareness, always fascinated me. When I was 12 years old, I'm going to really date myself here. There was there was a program on television in the late 1950s called Art Linkletter's House Party. It was an afternoon variety show. And he had a hypnotist on his show. And this hypnotist actually hypnotized people on the TV and had them do some remarkable things. And that just blew my mind. I was just, as a 12-year-old, just amazed. And not long after that, I found a coupon in the back of a Superman comic book that said I could order for $1.50 a book on hypnosis. And I did. I tried hypnotizing my brother. That didn't work, of course, but throughout my teenage years, I read a number of books on hypnosis, which led to meditation and contemplation. And by the early 70s, something called sports psychology, and then accelerated learning, all which had to do with the expanded awareness or higher consciousness of deep relaxation. And I began to notice that the more stressed I became, like in school, performance anxiety, I'm about to take a test and I know the material, but if I get nervous, my memory fails or my mind goes blank. And I thought, well, if stress and anxiety makes me stupid or degrades my memory or my ability to understand, then maybe these altered states of deep relaxation would be the antidote, would make me smarter and improve my memory and my insight and understanding. And that was 50 years ago. And I made a career out of it. So I began to integrate this avocation, this interest in accelerated learning and meditation and, just expanded awareness, being smarter and more insightful into my radio talk shows. People were fascinated by it. So as my radio career sort of faded away by my mid 40s or so, I still dabbled in radio part time, but the hobby, the avocation became my career. Personal development, emotional intelligence, self improvement, stress management, and radio became the hobby.
That's absolutely amazing. We're talking about releasing anxiety with Michael Benner, and you can find him at michaelbenner.com. Michael, we know how to spell that. Benner is a Benner, and you can check out his book there, Fearless Intelligence, which is a great read. I've been through it, and it's a deep study. The book itself is like a class. And at the end of most chapters or all chapters, there's not tests. What do you call it?
A little study guide.
Little study guide, things you can do to learn better, and it's deep. It's really deep. And throughout the book, Mike talks about his life a little bit here and there and the lessons he learned, like from camping and so forth. And not to digress, but you can also go to Amazon or other places where fine books are sold. But michaelbenner.com, you should be able to get it and check out the book. It's a good read. Michael, we are entrepreneurs and business people in the audience. I know I've said that a few times. So please teach us, how can we beat up anxiety? How can we release it? How can we move up in our business and life? And probably let's start here. Let's go to the title of your book, Fearless Intelligence. What is fearless intelligence?
Well, fearless intelligence, Tony, is the intelligence that comes from being fearless, or maybe better said, deeply relaxed and at peace. Performance, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional, is a relaxation skill. I mentioned sports psychology and accelerated learning. It even goes along with healing. There's a reason that illness is called dis-ease, because even though there are germs and bacteria and viruses and all manner of bugs and cooties in the world, mutagens and carcinogens, stress and anxiety degrade the immune system. It makes it difficult to stay healthy and difficult to heal. So in all areas, physical performance, physical health, mental health, emotional intelligence, mental intelligence, stress and anxiety debilitates, it weakens, it destroys, it shatters and scatters awareness and intelligence, insight and understanding, even to the point that we don't know what we're stressed about. People say, "What are you worried about?" Most people say, "I don't know." Well, that's the point, Tony. Whether we call it stress, anxiety, or fear, it doesn't really matter. It's just a matter of degree. Anxiety runs from panic and horror and terror on one end to I'm just slightly nervous or a little worried or mild apprehension on the other end. But whether it's a little or a lot, it is debilitating. It makes us stupid, and we make bad decisions. We don't understand things. We miss opportunities. It's deep relaxation that helps us to regain our intelligence and to amplify or accelerate our insight and our understanding. A nice allegory for this, and a way I suggest that your listeners and your viewers remember this, is to think about water. If we imagine ourselves on the dock in a small lake, or maybe in a little rowboat looking over the edge of the boat, down into the water, if the water is even slightly disturbed, if the surface of the water is swaying back and forth due to small wind waves, let's say, your ability to see into the water and your ability to see what's reflected on the surface is distorted. You can't see into the water, and you can't see what's on the surface that's reflected from above either, for that matter. But when the water, Tony, is as smooth as glass, now you can see deeply into the water, as well as, simply by shifting your focus, what's reflected on the surface. It's exactly the same with intelligence. Mental intelligence, emotional intelligence, as well as physical performance and health. Deep relaxation makes us smarter mentally, in terms of our ability to be logical and reasonable and analytical, but also emotional intelligence, which is the intelligence that is most undeveloped in people. And this is disastrous in our relationships, as this is a program about entrepreneurialism and the workplace and success in business. This is central. This is the biggest issue of all in two areas: our own performance and ability to deal with daily stresses and the unexpected, not only the routine, but unexpected stresses of business. And secondly, our relationships with other people. So there's a intrapersonal and interpersonal aspect to all of this. And in my experience working as a consultant with business, this is the biggest problem that most people have. A butcher knows how to cut meat, a baker can make bread, a banker knows how to account for the money, but most of them have horrible people skills. They don't know how to be good leaders. They don't know how to motivate. They don't know how to inspire. They don't have good empathy. And that's why most people hate their jobs. And that costs money. That hits your bottom line as well as your top line. And it can all be remedied by learning emotional intelligence. Again, a relaxation skill.
That's very interesting. Now, it's a common knowledge, a cliche these days, that we fear the unknown. What we don't know, we fear. And that brings anxiety, yet, but we don't know what it is. We don't know that there's something there. I kind of want to refer to, just before we started recording, we talked about right in your first chapter, you went out camping, your vehicle broke down, and it created this concern with you.
Yeah.
But in your vehicle, you were going camping. You had you had just about everything you needed, though I don't know about water particularly. But there was this fear now, or anxiety, and that's because I guess you didn't know what was going to happen.
It's not only that I didn't know what was going to happen. The bigger issue was I didn't know whether I could deal with it myself. There's two areas of awareness that we have to address. One is called situational awareness. That's events and circumstance and conditions and not having information. The uncertainty of the situation creates enormous stress. But even deeper and more to the point, Tony, is self-awareness, the result of not understanding who we are. Most of us are like actors. We choose a personality or a character as teenagers. We're much more real as little children. But as teenagers, we choose a persona. And then as we move into adulthood, we develop that personality. Most of us have several. For example, when you're with your really good friends, you're a very different person. than when you're at work. When you're with your parents, you're a very different person than when you're with your friends. And I'm not saying this is necessarily a bad thing. I think it's a good thing, but it certainly would benefit us to be aware of what we're doing, because it begs the question, who are you really behind those roles, behind those characters that you play? Again, like an actor in Hollywood or in theater on Broadway, you may play a number of different roles, but when the curtain comes down or the camera fades to black and you take off the face paint and the costume, who are you really? And in order to know that, you need to relax, to expand your awareness. And then by expanding your awareness, you know yourself better. So again, all stress is, as you say, fear of the unknown. Stress and anxiety has nothing to do with danger, no matter what the dictionary says. It's what you don't know about a situation, whether it's dangerous or not, doesn't really matter. It's what you don't know about it that has you worried. And in the area of self-awareness, it's what you don't know about yourself that has you stressed out and worried. Who am I? Am I capable? Can I do this? Am I smart enough? Fear of inadequacy is an enormous fear that few people really admit, but those private conversations, it's going on throughout our lives. Am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Am I handsome enough? Am I accepted by these other people? Do they see me as a leader? Do I have the credibility? Do they like me? Do they trust me? If you have the answers to those questions, not only are you going to be a better leader and more successful in all areas of your life, but it will matter less and less what other people think. All that worrying about what other people might think goes away because you know the truth. And the game is rigged. Nobody is bad, weak, or wrong. There are God, nature, the universe does not make junk. It's one of the things I learned from backpacking. Nature is beautiful. There's no ugly trees. There's no defective flowers. Everything fits perfectly in nature. It's a beautiful, symbiotic, closed system. And so who are we to pull ourselves out of nature and say, well, maybe I'm not good enough? Nonsense. Maybe you're not good enough at this or that or something else, but there are other areas that make you unique where you're exceedingly talented. And if you follow your heart and think clearly, but really follow your heart, using states of relaxation, meditation, contemplation, introspection, deep relaxation, close your eyes, turn away from the material world, breathe, relax, and inquire, who am I? Why do I feel the way I feel? This is emotional intelligence. What's the meaning of this feeling? If someone stimulates your anger, instead of obsessing on them and trying to understand why they made you angry, identify the anger as your personal response. Why does this irritate me? Why does this make me angry? What does this remind me of? What does it say about who I am?
Can I ask this in a simple way? Like, I'm going to reverse it in a way. It seems like that our problems come primarily because of ignorance or fear on something. And that if we were able to tackle that, if we were able to deal with that completely, we'd be in good shape.
Few people ever realize throughout their lives that problems do not exist in the world. They exist in our perception of the world. It's only a problem because you don't understand it. Other people are living in the same world, often under exactly the same or very similar conditions. And for them, this is not a problem. But because our senses point us out into the world, our eyes are looking out, our ears, our ability to smell and taste and touch, to reach out into the world, we fixate on the material world. And we think our problems are being done to us from the world, other people, individuals, groups, circumstances, and conditions. So I've got to change the world to fix the problem. And that's backward thinking.
I gotcha.
Change yourself. It's your perception of the world that's causing the problem. Don't fix the world, change yourself and your view of the world. Work on yourself, develop. This is not self-blame, by the way.
It seems to be at odds with another statement I got out of your book. You can explain that perhaps at the same time, that if you try harder on something, it makes it worse.
Yeah.
But if it's your perception that you need to fix and you work on that, you're better. So, kind of a conundrum here. Perhaps you could help unravel that.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about taking responsibility for your life. If I don't like a movie, I might be tempted to rush at the screen and try to manipulate the light that's reflected on the wall to change the movie, but that would be a fool's errand. Any idiot knows the movie is actually projected from a booth behind you. And so if I want to change the movie, I've really got to go behind me up into the projection booth. When you understand that your life is a reflection of your projection, life literally is what you make it. It doesn't mean other people are not participating, they're doing the same thing. And the material world is real. We can't overstate the idea that it's an illusion and therefore it doesn't really matter. And don't take life as a dream too literally. But it is, again, the old saw, life is what you make it. It is, to a large extent, a reflection of your perception. Reality is our perception of the reflection of your projection. Does that make sense to you?
It's like a tongue twister.
Let me say it even more simply. It's a reflection of your projection.
Okay,
All right?
I like that.
By changing yourself, you change the movie. Let's take a look again at emotional intelligence and how contagious emotions are. If someone comes into the room and you're sitting there and they're just laughing, and you don't know why, they just walk into the room giggling and laughing, how does it make you feel?
It changes the mood. For whatever reason, I thought of it sometimes where something happens and you just get so mad or angry. It's just like not good. And then somebody starts laughing about it. And then you start laughing about it. And it just changes everything. Now, it may not be the point you were making, but it just shows how your perception is everything on the issue. It didn't make the problem go away, but it no longer was something to create great anger.
And if somebody comes into the room angry, even if they're not angry at you, they're just angry and upset.
That brings me down.
Yeah, so emotions are very contagious. And if someone is angry at you, then we get angry back. And if they start using foul language and threatening us and insulting us, we're likely to respond in kind, unconsciously, not even choosing to behave that way. What if you had practiced relaxation exercises like meditation, introspection, mindfulness, contemplation, and had developed your awareness to the point where you go, I can choose to react or respond in a different way. I can refuse to get angry. I can refuse, in response, I can refuse to reflect his behavior and not use that kind of language. I can choose to de-escalate. This is what I did with the Sheriff's Academy and the training I did down in Anaheim for years, teaching them to de-escalate a situation by becoming, we called it internal vigilance, more aware of their feelings and the choices they have as they become more and more aware of how to respond. This is what a good leader needs to do, what a good business person needs to do. How about at home? What a good spouse or partner needs to do is to make better choices. Well, as long as we're stressed and upset and angry or frightened or sad and depressed or any negative feeling, we're going to have fewer and fewer choices. Again, fearless intelligence, as you learn to relax and become fearless, your intelligence skyrockets. And you say to yourself, I've got choices, number one. Number two, as you become more aware, I have more choices than are immediately apparent. I've got lots of choices, even though I'm not sure what they are right now. My choices may not include controlling the other person, but I could control how I look at this and how I respond. And number four, I could choose responses that are for the greater good of everyone, not only myself, but the person who's angry and attacking me. That's real leadership.
That requires the person to be not self-centered. I'm trying to think of a better word, well-grounded,
Self-aware.
self-aware, where things like that, events, don't stress them out and make the person operate uncontrollably or out of character.
Right,
The person has to be, I think, well-grounded. You call that self-aware?
right.
Tell us more about that. And you have a term called eustress. Is that part of this, or how does that fit in with all this?
Well, that's somewhat tangential. I can address that. Not all stress is bad. Eustress is spelled EUSTRESS, EU stress. And eustress is good stress, Tony. That's the kind of anxiety that to a certain point will help us do better, to psych up, to prepare for a performance. Again, I say performance like it could be on stage, public speaking, singing, dancing. It could be athletic performance. But I'm talking about your daily performance, the way you behave with your spouse, if you're having some conflict or a challenging situation at work. My God, we're all stressed at work. Stress is stimulus, and the more stimulated you are, the more stressed you become. And the more likely you are to feel out of control and fall back into this reactive pattern where everything unknown seems dangerous. Well, everything unknown is not dangerous. It's hardly ever it's hardly ever dangerous. It's just unknown. The antidote is to know it. So a little bit of stress, eustress is a good thing to a point. And then there's a point of diminishing return where additional stress becomes distressful. So eustress helps you get better and better, but very quickly there's a point where more stress becomes distressful and degrades performance and insight and understanding.
I was thinking of when I first started podcasting. There's so many moving parts in a way, Michael, and I'm really focused on this, on what to say and who the guest is and all these things. And if some world or local event comes that's bad news, it changes my demeanor, it changes my eustress, it changes my psyche. I've made it as a rule: if there's bad news, don't tell me until after I do an interview, because it totally changes. I've seen that if I'm not like really focused, like I'm so zoned in on this interview to such a good degree that I exclude the world, but I'm very aware or self-aware, grounded into what we're doing. And that allows me to, I believe, help me podcast as best as I can, if there's such a term. Otherwise, if there's bad news, it really can affect me. So I don't want to hear it until after I do the interviews.
Well, I understand that, and I think that's smart. If, however, there was something disastrous that happened and you needed to do the interview anyway, what I would suggest, and this applies in business all the time, you just take a moment and close your eyes. Now, I know a lot of people at the workplace are not in a position where they can close their eyes. Unfortunately, this is not appreciated as a productive state. It looks like somebody's taking a nap or escaping or going away. And indeed, it could be. But when you close your eyes for the purpose of thinking creatively, of expanding your insight and developing your understanding, my God, history is full of examples of this. Edison deliberately took cat naps, and they were called cat naps, but he was really meditating. Thomas Edison would hold as a practice two large steel ball bearings, one in each hand, and place beneath his hands metal plates on the floor. And then he would sit in the chair holding these ball bearings big, like 2-inch ball bearings. And he'd sit back in his chair and he'd close his eyes and he'd dream of his inventions, the phonograph, the film projector, the record player, whatever. And if you went too deep and fell asleep, he would drop one or both of the balls and they would hit the steel plates and wake him up. He'd scoop them up and then go back to that in-between state, that dreamlike state, and use the mind's eye to visualize the machine. Tesla did the same thing. He said, I've got hundreds of machines in my mind.
Amazing.
This is sports psychology. God, there's a great series. I think it's a 7-part series on Netflix called The Queen's Gambit, which is about a chess player. And this woman plays chess games in her mind by visualizing, and she does it with her eyes closed, but sometimes she opens her eyes. It doesn't really matter. She does it in bed at night with the room dark, as if she's playing a game on the ceiling and seeing the game pieces projected on the ceiling. Well, let's say you've got a job interview, or the boss has called you into the office and you know it's going to be big trouble, or you have a cold call to make, or an important follow-up on a contract, or some other business situation that you're worried about. You know it's challenging and stressful, and you're concerned about how it goes. By thinking about all the negative ways that things could happen, you begin to attract that. You begin to magnetize that. Just like a car, you go where you look, you get what you expect, you reap what you sow. Ask any race driver. The NASCAR guys always say, never look at the wall. You know why a race car driver knows never to look at the wall?
Because you would tend to be going towards that.
You go where you look. So if you sit there worrying about the meeting or the phone call, thinking up all the negative stuff as if this is your plan to avoid it, you're actually generating it.
It's true.
And then you're gathering evidence that you should continue to worry and think negatively. You have this crazy idea that that's a way of being careful. All right. Instead, what you should do is close your eyes, take a few slow, deep breaths, relax. Or if you're in a workplace where you cannot close your eyes, just soften your gaze and fix your attention on a single point, wherever it is. Look at something on your desk or a clock on the wall and imagine, just soften your gaze and imagine, if not visually, at least auditorily, in your ability to hear voices in your head, this phone call or this meeting going exactly as you want it to go. Hear yourself speaking eloquently and making your point concisely and clearly. Hear the person who you're concerned about not being receptive to you, agreeing, and imagine them nodding. And if they do have an objection, listen to yourself and visualize yourself really elegantly overcoming that objection, maybe acknowledging it first and say, yeah, I used to think that too, but here's what I found. And being really smart about it and then developing your confidence in such a way. This, every successful person from Napoleon Hill to Dale Carnegie, Norman Vincent Peale, Zig Ziglar, all these guys talk about this stuff. And if you're not doing it, you're out of your mind with worry and doubt, and you're competing with other people that do the same thing. If you want to go beyond the Peter Principle and rise to the true potential, the incredible, remarkable potential that every individual has, if we were not unique, we would not be here. This universe doesn't replicate anything, not snowflakes, not grains of sand.
Everyone's unique.
Everybody has talent. Everybody has special gifts. This is how you find them, follow your heart, discover them, develop them, and then rise above the average Joe by rehearsing your life before you step out into it.
Michael, if we were able to do that visualization, we would all be superstars in our business because totally
You are able. The question is, are you willing? Not whether you're able. Are you willing to?
It takes work and practice because bad thoughts will come in and bad things. You just kind of have to learn to control your mind. But once you can do that, then yes. And it starts by trying to control the mind, to put in there what you want and how you want. And I totally get it. It's a game changer, just that. And that's a whole series of podcasts and everything just on honing that down and getting that skill in place. I think that's very important. A lot of major sports stars and so forth do that as well. It with physical, Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, Arnold Palmer. You've told me that. I'm repeating you from earlier episodes. And while we have a few moments, I wanted to ask something a little bit different, but I know it ties back in. I wanted to ask you, Michael, about instinct and intuition and how that plays into this, and perhaps kind of separate that out because it seems like the same thing, but you've got a great way to describe how it is different.
Well, both are so-called gut feelings. That's where we get confused. But they're a spectrum or a continuum. It's like a bar magnet. It's one magnet, one magnetic field, but there's a North Pole and a South Pole that are very different. And all of that is true. The polarity of the North Pole and the polarity of the South Pole are opposites, but that's necessary to make one magnetic field. That's the way instinct and intuition plays out as an alternative to logic. And we need both. I would never suggest that someone cease being logical and analytical and reasonable. And we can do that in any state of mind, even quite stressed. You can be logical. You can be worried and still balance your checkbook. You can do your day-to-day activities even if you're stressed. Intuition requires deep relaxation. And the difference between intuition and instinct, and the reason I say they're sort of like a bar magnet or a continuum, is that let's start with the instinct. That's at the base of the spine. It's an actual hub of nerves it's called a plexus, a hub of nerves at the base of the spine, sometimes called the root chakra. And it's basically, oh no, it's danger. It's an animal instinct. It's run away. Instinct is what to avoid. Oh no, run away. And it overwhelms logic and reasoning and rational thinking. If you're terribly frightened, your instinct will tell you run or fight. And you don't have to think about it and you don't have to choose. It just takes you over, something we've inherited from our ancestors who survived and procreated because they were especially good at getting frightened easily. Instinct is at the base of the spine. Intuition is much higher. It's in the heart area or just below the heart. And intuition is, oh boy, it's what to move toward. Now, again, both are gut feelings, but the oh boy, the intuition is higher up. It's more in the heart area, whereas the instinct is more down in the pelvis or the groin area. Most of our feelings are in the solar plexus in between. They're sort of a blend of intuition and instinct, sort of a blend of oh boy about this part and oh no about that part. Well, imagine if you get familiar with this. And when a feeling comes up, instead of blaming another person for stimulating the feeling and obsessing on them and trying to figure them out and why they're such a jerk and what you're going to do to control them and threaten them and the retribution and vengeance you're going to exact upon them. And why don't people love me and all of that madness? Take a breath and relax and own the damn feeling. It's your response. It wasn't done to you. The stimulus was done to you, but the feeling is your response. It's very personal. Want to learn about it, study it. Where does that emotion live in your body? What does it remind you of? What does it feel like? What is it, if it had a color, what color would it be? If you could reach out and touch that emotional feeling for texture or temperature, how would it feel? And then your intuition blossoms. Initially, the instinct may say, run, hide, get out of here, quit your job, divorce your wife. I'm out of here. I hate this stuff. But if you sit with it, the intuition blossoms and you get creative insight and understanding and what is often called the aha experience of illumination. And it may come slowly like the dawning of an idea. It may pop on like a light bulb. It may blow the top of your head off. You may be thunderstruck. Whether it comes in slowly or quickly, it's not logical. It's not illogical, but it's not reasoning. It's not figuring it out. It's allowing it to bubble up, allowing it. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, I see. It's very similar to your conscience. Conscience is a fascinating aspect of consciousness. Conscience is not only Jiminy Cricket, not only does it know right from wrong, it's got the answers to the problems. I would go so far as to suggest, and I've been doing this 40 years, Tony, we would not have a problem if there wasn't an answer enfolded within it. That's why I say the game is rigged. Every problem is a gift. Every challenge, every difficulty, provided you own it, take responsibility for it, understand it as yours. Don't blame others. Don't blame yourself. Just abandon the whole idea of blame and take responsibility. It's like the gauges on the dashboard of your car. You may not want the oil pressure gauge to indicate a problem or the fuel gauge to say you're running out of gas or the water gauge to say you're overheating. But if you mask the dashboard with heavy brown wrapping paper and say, there, now nothing bad can happen, well, that's obviously foolish. And yet that's what we do with our emotions. Excuse me, I'll have another beer. See? Give me a double whiskey, give me a doobie, whatever. I'm going to self-medicate. I want all these feelings to go away. You're a fool when you do that. And yet that's most people most of the time in most of the world.
Amazing stuff, Michael. Once again, we spoke with Michael Benner talking about releasing anxiety, and you can find him at michaelbenner.com. Check out that book, Fearless Intelligence. Michael, I just want to thank you so much. I easily do more and more shows. So much advice, so much about intuition and ignorance and fear and intelligence. And just, I love it. Could have soaked it up.
Thank you, buddy.
Why